When we saw this place, it was 10 years now we've been here, and used to live in London. Had quite a nice garden there, but we saw this place, and it's got a few acres, and it was an opportunity for me to plan out a real wildlife garden, and I had time and I had space. I could, really sit down and plan out what I wanted and where. I made a lot of mistakes, over the years, and like we all do, I suppose, but in gardening. But kind of it's all coming right now, and that was one of the attractions. I've got a nice house, but it's this out here that fascinates me, and how we can mix in the pleasure of gardening and the beauty of gardening, but also remembering that there's creatures and insects and birds around that can enhance that and give you a great deal of joy, a great peace of mind, actually. I'm Sean Bean, and this is Get Birding in collaboration with Forest Holidays. In this episode, we're exploring bird-friendly gardening. I've got a load of nettles, but they're towards the back, which is fine. I'm not running through them every day. And how to make the most of your local patch.
Plants that will eventually produce food or attract insects that birds eat and stuff like that. Like basically just being more nature friendly is always going to create a space where birds are more likely to survive.
We'll be talking about why letting things get messy can be good for the birds.
We've got some big veteran oak trees. It's also non-intervention woodland, so there's lots of dead wood here, standing dead wood and fallen dead wood, and we know how important that is for a healthy woodland ecosystem.
And for our own heads too.
It's the new rock and roll, Sean. These things make us so happy. So good.
You'll hear from returning guests Zoe Ball and Joe Whiley, alongside our resident birders, Dr Mya-Rose Craig and Jason Singh.
Events like Murmurations inspire us to experience awe and wonder on a daily basis.
And we'll be spending time with the reigning stars of the winter sky, the starlings.
I really like the phrase, the ballet of the skies, to describe what's going on, because you do just have this sort of whirling, swirling 3D mass of birds.
You'll know our next guest from the airwaves and from our episode on birdsong. Zoe Ball and Joe Whiley both came to birding later in life and are sharing their passion for gardening and wildlife on their own podcast, Dig It.
When you get home off a production, you find the great outdoors and, and checking out the birds, twitching, looking at the birds, being outdoors is really therapeutic for you. Do you garden? Do you dig stuff up? Do you plant stuff? Do you do veg? What are your gardening experiences?
Planted a lot of native trees, just like saplings when they were small, and sometimes you only have to make a spit with a spade, put them in and then squash it back in again. I think. That's what they told me.
The Sean Bean gardening technique, easy. I love it.
It's easy.
Dig a hole, stick it in.
And then they've grown now, 5-6 years later, they're 10 foot high, and so I'm growing like hedgerows and copses and stuff like that. Me and my garden, mainly him.
Well, you were in Lady Chatterley's Lover, weren't you?
Yeah.
It's sort of like that role actually became real life without the scandal of the drama. The outdoors is what I'm talking about here. It's amazing. It's been so therapeutic to both Joe and I being out in nature and our gardens, and we've both grown roses, and we've both learned that some things work and some things don't, but that's okay. And the benefits of tree mulch. Who thought we'd be collecting our leaves and realising it's such a gift, gardening. Yeah, look at us all.
When we were young.
It is the... I know, it's the new rock and roll, Sean. These things make us so happy. So good.
I like it here because you see a lot of the sky, as you said, I love the seasons and how things change and different birds, and there's like a lot of redwings we've got here at the moment that come in the winter and they eat all the berries off the trees, and then you get swallows and house martins in the spring and in the summer. So it's just constantly evolving, and I just love to see the transition of the seasons, how they change and what comes up from the earth. And you know, I kind of like the prehistoric look. I've got a lot of ferns and things like that. But it's like they say, your feet are planted firmly on the earth, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that. It's so grounding, and it's just not like anything you ever do, like our jobs and stuff like that. It's nothing to do with them, and I don't like anybody ringing me up and things when I'm outside and gardening. My granddad, he was a big gardener, but that was just after the war, and everybody were growing their own crops and had their allotments and stuff like that, and he just filled his garden. It weren't a big garden, and he was brilliant at growing. He had a little greenhouse with tomatoes, and he grew everything, just self-sufficient, absolutely self-sufficient. And I learnt a lot off him, but I weren't that interested in vegetables sometimes. So my next door neighbour was a guy called Ron Howard, and not the film director, by the way. He was a lovely old guy, and he'd lived next door to our family. A lovely guy. We were always very sociable. We were always meeting up. And he taught me a lot about gardening and birds especially. You know, he was a good friend, and that's how I picked a lot of it up, I suppose. And it wasn't really till I'd finished drama school and I started working, I managed to get a place of our own, and I'd got a garden again. And then a bit more money, I got a bigger garden. It went on from there. But I did the same thing. I always put a little pond in every garden I went to, because I love ponds. I love what they attract, the frogs, all the wildlife. So the ponds have got bigger and all. There's a big one over there, and now we get mallards and moorhens and kingfishers and all sorts of stuff on there. And then I had a bit more time, you know, I'd be working away, but I'd come back and I'd have gaps, and I had quite a few gaps, so I could spend a bit more time in the garden, I suppose.
More chiffchaffs are choosing to overwinter in our gardens rather than flying to Africa. Does this give them a head start on the best territories, or are they one beast from the east away from disaster? Yes to both, I suppose. Chiffchaffs, last 20, 30 years especially, more and more are staying here over winter. We know why, climate change, mild. And I think we forget that migration has issues of its own, you know, having to fly that far, maybe getting eaten. So it's not necessarily a bad idea for them to stick around if they're not going to freeze to death. And it does give them a head start on territories. But also, we do get cold snaps. You know, we can get quite nasty cold snaps and kind of February time. Yeah, and they're very small birds. So I think it's part of this wider pattern. We've got quite a lot of species that are increasingly just staying here in the UK.
It's warm.
Because it's warm. I don't really know what this means for the future of chiffchaffs, though.
If there are chiffchaffs in your garden, is there anything you should do to help them overwinter against the cold?
I guess the same as you do for any birds that you're trying to help overwinter, which is like having food out, making sure that you have water out that's not frozen over. And I think in general, maybe having a think about how you can make your garden more bird friendly. So kind of having plants that will eventually produce food or attract insects that birds eat and stuff like that. Like basically just being more nature friendly is always going to create a space where birds are more likely to survive.
Yeah, it's like hawthorns, isn't it? I mean, I've planted a lot of hawthorns, and the redwings I was talking about. They more or less stripped this big hawthorn tree, you know, in a day. Yeah. But you know, I think they're a good meal. I don't mind losing the berries, but I guess it's stuff like that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like just, I guess, moving away from kind of very pruned lawns and stuff to kind of places where animals can actually live.
Rewilding your garden for birds doesn't have to be complicated. It often starts with just letting things get a little bit untidy.
I love my wild area because it means it's less work for me, right? I don't have to do anything. I just have to let it go. So it's great. Nobody's on my case about tidying it up. I'm like, no, that's for the hedgehogs, it's for the butterflies, it's for the caterpillars.
Here's NHS doctor and RSPB president, Dr Amir Khan.
at the back of our garden, we've got a little pond that we built, and then at the back of the pond, we've got all the nettles, and it's also close to our compost heap. So we get loads of caterpillars. Well, not right now, but in the spring and summer, we get lots of caterpillars. Yeah. And then we see the blue tits coming in and picking them off, and then taking them off to their nests and stuff. It's such a wonderful thing to see, and it's so easy for us all to do. We've just got to move away from this kind of idea of manicured gardens, right? Where everything has to be perfect.
I know it is. It's like me. We've got a load of nettles, but they're towards the back, which is fine. I'm not running through them every day.
Yeah.
I
mean, it is a bugger when you get stuck. It is a bugger.
Wherever I've been, I've always put a pond in, because you don't have to have a big pond for what it attracts. For frogs and newts and all sorts of stuff, doesn't it?
All the insects that ponds bring with them as well are perfect for birds, aren't they? So we've got a wren that kind of hops around our pond, picking off things that are flying close by to it.
For the little amount of effort, what it can bring, it's an incredible, array of species and insects and birds and animals, isn't it? Just for that one little patch,
Yeah, totally.
Trees are bare, and we can see their movement a lot easier. I've just seen a nuthatch on this big oak tree behind us. We've got a great tit calling in the background. Robin.
Now we're heading over to one of the forest holiday ranges to see what's happening on their patch.
Hi, I'm Gerry, Forest Ranger for Forest Holidays, based in the Forest of Dean. I've come down to a patch of local woodland today that I really enjoy, and it's nice just to be present, to be still, to be calm, to be patient, and just see what arrives, what comes. Birdsong has intensified. In the last hour or so we had quite a misty start to the morning, but as it's brightening up, the birds are starting to sing and proclaim territory. We've got some big veteran oak trees. It's also non-intervention woodland, so there's lots of dead wood here, standing dead wood and fallen dead wood. Super, super important for nesting and for feeding. There'll be lots of grubs and little insects in that dead wood that helps to keep the ecosystem vibrant and healthy.
It's great to see everything coming out, like all these little things.
That's what's so exciting about spring, though, is like watching everything come up through. I think that's why I love snowdrops.
Yeah. I'm always looking, animals or any little thing that's moving about. I love it, so...
there are these particular things you can do in the wintertime that I think are so special. Like I went to go see, have you ever seen the starling Murmurations? Because I went to go see them last month down in... on the Somerset Levels, and they're incredible.
Oh, really?
We saw probably like 100,000 starlings coming together, and it was beautiful. And you only see that in the dead of winter,
Yeah, I remember being in Birmingham, and middle of city centre of Birmingham about 30 years ago, and it was snowing. It was winter, and they were just like, it went dark. Well, it went dark. There was a massive shadow. There were thousands and thousands of them. I don't know if they're still there in those kind of numbers, but it was strange to think of a big metropolitan city. And the buses and traffic going round. There's just this mass of starlings, casting shadows. They just change like that, don't they?
No, it's so beautiful. I always think of them when people tell me, like, oh, there's nothing to see in the winter. And it's like, oh, go and find yourself some starlings and you'll take them back.
Yeah, you just have to find them, don't you, really, I suppose.
I was filming them at Dungeness, and they roost in there's some sort of lakey gravel pit stuff there with reed beds where they roost, and I went there to film them, and they turned up. First of all, they were all on the power lines going to the power station. They were all stretched out on there, and then they took off and started murmurating near the roost. And down on the nuclear power station there's a family of peregrine falcons, and that's about 2 miles away. So they're buzzing around. Then they suddenly all bomb off down to the power station, wake up the peregrines, clearly deliberately, have a chase around for 20 minutes, and then they come back and roost. So their relationship with their nemesis is a complicated one. They actually want a chase. But they're nutters. On a stormy day in Brighton, they respond to the sea. They fly down to the waves. They're daredevils. They go so close to the waves, and they love it. You can see the joy in them.
Murmurations can be seen from late autumn into early spring. But February evenings, when flock sizes are at their largest, tend to produce the most consistent displays.
Every afternoon, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon at this time of year, you'll see the starlings. They've often just bathed, and they do everything together. Their behaviour is coordinated before they even hatched out of the eggs. They're already synchronised. But that's to do with the singing in the colony. The singing increases so that all the females lay their eggs at the same time, so that they all hatch at the same time, they all fledge at the same time, and then throughout their lives they feed at the same time. They do everything together. But in the afternoons at this time of year, they'll have a wash, and they'll typically perch up on a telegraph wire, and you'll see them all pointing into the wind, preening away, having a blow dry before the murm. I'm Steve Geliot. I've been an artist most of my life. I trained in Brighton. I started to get obsessed by it in about 2016. That was a difficult time for us as a family. One of our daughters was seriously ill, and I found that watching the starlings was the thing that kept me from going mad. It was just such a reassuring and inspiring sort of experience. People talk about awe, the experience of awe, and it's not just that their velocity is coordinated, their speed and direction, but their actual wing beats are coordinated. By this stage of the season anyway, they have this flat glide pattern to their flight. These are creatures that live their life at 40 miles an hour. And, you look at them and their wings are going together like synchronised swimmers. It's just incredible.
But what's actually happening in those moments? And how do thousands of birds move together without colliding?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of work done to try and figure this one out, because there is no lead starling, there's no conductor, if you think about something like the red arrows, you've got no person giving the commands as to what happens.
To explain more, here's one of our Get Birding experts.
I'm Professor Anne Goodenough. I work at the University of Gloucestershire, where I'm an applied ecologist. I teach the next generation of ecologists and conservationists, and I'm passionate about anything in the natural world, but especially birds. There's actually 2 really simple rules as far as starlings are concerned to avoid bumping into one another. The first is that every individual starling keeps the same distance apart from its neighbouring starlings, and that's the starlings in front and behind, above and below, left and right. And that's not a set distance. It's just that every individual bird is keeping the same distance apart from all of its neighbours at the same time. And what that means is that if one bird goes right, then the next bird will have to go right to keep the same distance, and then the next bird will have to go right to keep the same distance, and so on. So you get effectively a really useful form of self-organisation just from one really simple rule. That works for a lot of the murmuration physics and dynamics, but at some point, if you're watching murmurations, you might see a murmuration split and then come back together. And obviously then at some point, birds have got to make a decision about where they go. And you then get a second rule that comes into play, which is to sort of aim for areas where the density of birds is kind of middling. You don't want to aim for areas that have got very few birds. In other words, you don't want to go outside of the murmuration and just aim for sky. Equally, you don't want to just go for great density of birds, because if you take that to extremes, the murmuration would basically implode. And they are much better at keeping equal distance apart than humans are. An awful lot of traffic jams, for example, start particularly on motorways, where one person gets too close to the person in front and puts their brakes on, and then the next person does the same thing, and then before you know it, the sort of dynamics of people driving along the motorway is fundamentally altered because somebody hasn't obeyed that simple rule of making sure they've got enough space to the person in front. Starlings don't do that. Starlings are much, much better than humans when it comes to obeying that rule of sensible and equal distance. Why does it happen? Several different ideas, and in all honesty, it's probably a little bit of a combination. One is the idea of warmer together. So, as I say, these happen autumn and winter. It's much warmer to roost as part of a large roost of birds rather than a small roost of birds or on your own. So one concept is that it might be the fact that the murmuration is effectively an advertisement for where the roost is going to be. So the murmuration just signpoints the roost. So you get multiple birds performing this aerial display, this ballet of the skies above a roost site, usually starting at or around sunset and going on until it's basically too dark to really see what they're doing any longer. And you get what I call the down the plug hole movement, where one bird goes down and literally all of the others sort of swirl down and go down over that same point, and that becomes the overnight roost. And some of the research that I've been involved in has found that murmurations are bigger and last longer when it's colder. Probably a bigger driver is around predation. So when birds are going down to roost, they are quite vulnerable. Birds of prey will always hunt by getting focus lock on a bird. So they don't just sort of fly in with open talons and, do the best job they can. They very much try and pinpoint, as you would with shooting a missile. You pinpoint the target and you go in after the target. If birds are moving as part of a 3D swirling mass of birds, it's much harder to get focus lock for a bird of prey, and therefore starlings are safer. So you've got sort of two competing ideas, and I think it's probably a combination of the two, either warmer together or safer together.
It's fascinating to visually see interconnectedness, like to actually see thousands of individuals coming together as one conscious thing. That to me is, it's almost a spiritual act, isn't it? It's a spiritual experience.
Starlings are the great mimics of the bird world. From car alarms to phone ringtones, they borrow sound from all around us. Here to help us listen more closely is our resident birder, the composer and nature beatboxer, Jason Singh.
There was a video that went viral of two starlings vocalizing. And it's of these two starlings that are creating these whole crazy, almost like electronic textures and vocalizations of sounds. And what was interesting was that in the past, people used to say to me, oh, have you seen this beatboxer? Have you seen that beatboxer? Do you know this beatboxer? Have you heard that thing? And when I started kind of moving into the realms of nature and wildlife sort of openly, I started getting people saying, have you heard this bird? Have you heard that bird? Have you heard this bird? And the sounds that the starlings are making just sound like sort of electronic, glitch, percussive music. It's like listening to Aphex Twin. Their songs were quite complex, but it's kind of like it's those kinds of sounds, like short, sharp, staccato textures. And then there was like sounds of trumpets, and there's so much detail and technicality. And, it's like a natural R2-D2 with that sort of murmuration. We are, living in the modern world of devices and technology and distraction and, consumerism and all of these things that kind of want us to be less aware of ourselves and our environment. But I think events like Murmurations inspire us to experience awe and wonder on a daily basis.
I think one thing that really stuck with me from doing the citizen science aspect of the research was we were asking people to fill in details of what murmurations they'd seen, and on the form we had it that they could fill in any date going to the start of that particular murmuration season, which was the start of October 2014 at the time. And I had a partial record come in with no date and just some comments in the text box saying that the person who was filling the survey in couldn't go back far enough in date to fill in the details, but still wanted to tell me about the murmuration. And the murmuration that he saw was in 1944 over in occupied France when he was a soldier in the Second World War in very, very difficult conditions. And that starling murmuration had stayed with him, that watching that phenomenon had stayed with him all those years later. And he was completing this survey to tell me about a murmuration in 1944. And even as I'm saying that to you now, I'm sort of feeling the emotion behind that, because I just think, how amazing is that he's still got all those years later that memory of that murmuration and what it meant to him in very, very difficult circumstances. So I think birds really do have an incredible power, and immersing yourself in the natural world is amazing, whatever your personal situation. But if your personal situation is tough at the moment, get outside, get into nature, watch birds.
Starlings in Winter by Mary Oliver. Chunky and noisy, but with stars in their black feathers. They spring from the telephone wire and instantly they are acrobats in the freezing wind. And now, in the theatre of air, they swing over buildings, dipping and rising. They float like one stippled star that opens, becomes for a moment fragmented, then closes again. And you watch and you try, but you simply can't imagine how they do it. With no articulated instruction, no pause, only the silent confirmation that they are this notable thing. This wheel of many parts that can rise and spin over and over again, full of gorgeous life. Ah, the world, what lessons you prepare for us. Even in the leafless winter, even in the ashy city, I'm thinking now of grief and of getting past it. I feel my boots trying to leave the ground. I feel my heart pumping hard. I want to think again of dangerous and noble things. I want to be light and frolicsome. I want to be improbable, beautiful, and afraid of nothing, as though I had wings.
Here's a quick tip for the cold. If you're putting water out and it's freezing, don't add salt. It's bad for the birds. Place the bath in a sunny sheltered spot or float a ping pong ball in the tray to keep the ice from forming. We want them hydrated, not pickled. That's all for this episode. Thanks for coming along with us today, and I'll see you in a fortnight, birdies. Get Birding was produced by Hannah Walker-Brown. The executive producer is Jane Gerber. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This is a Get Birding production in collaboration with Forest Holidays.